Well this morning, and so students, you know that if you received the Student Standout Award since we've been back off of vacation, you have done something either in class or on the playground or with your homework or with your reading that has caught your teacher's eye, and they think that you need to be recognized in front of the whole school for doing a great job. So, if you hear your name for being the Student Standout for this week, come on up, get your coyote tag, and then we'll have you all stand up here with me so the whole school gets to see what a great job you've done for the last 2 weeks. So boys and girls, let's go ahead and congratulate our Student Standouts. In Mrs. Pacheco's class, we have Abby A. and Ryan B. In Mrs. Reed's class, we have Esther and Eric. In Mrs. Schnablu's class, we have Jennifer and Stephanie. In Mrs. Elise, we have Natasha and Georgie. In Mrs. Whiteley, we have Shelley and Hallie. In Mrs. Yoshitomi, we have Riza and Austin. In Mrs. Moreau's class, we have Jocelyn M. and Daniel A. In Miss Ravini's class, we have Robert and Kira. In Mrs. Contreras, Gracie and Nehemiah. In Mrs. Miller and DeBach's class, Sarah and Gavin. In Mrs. Kelso, Emilio and Nathanalia. In Mrs. Silva's class, Brian and Angelia. In Mrs. V's class, Alex. In Mrs. Ashby's class, Tracy and Victoria. In Mrs. Franz, Max and Cecilia. Mrs. Leideman, Emily, and we have Emily and Tanea. In Mrs. Skrull, we have Jennifer and Noah. In Mrs. Edwards, we have Dean and Chloe S. In Mrs. DeLuca, Absent and Yolanda. In Mrs. Heinrich, Harmony A. and James W. In Mrs. Levy, Desiree and Caesar P. In Mrs. Rodriguez, Justin. In Mrs. Selby, Gabby and Grace. In Mrs. Anderson, Trevor, and Aline. In Mrs. Benson, Desiree and Carlos. In Mrs. Kiner, Daisy and Edwin. Mrs. Spoor, Adrian B. and Hallie T. And Mrs. Williams, Michael, and Victoria. Okay, boys and girls, as you're looking forward at me, you're able to see all of the students who have caught their teacher's eye, who have done a great job in something here at school, either homework or classwork or on the playground or behavior. And so we are so proud of all of our students, but really extra proud of our students who are up here this morning. So boys and girls, let's give them a huge round of applause. You're up here with me. Go ahead and turn around and face the flag. We'll have all of our students go ahead and stand at this time.
What'd you get? Wow, good job, Bo.